want to welcome the fact that the government did take a look at the points that were made in this House on the last occasion and realised that they weren't just simply asking for a 6-month extension followed by a 3-month extension. They were asking this House to agree that there should be a 6-month extension followed by an open-ended series of 3-month extensions virtually forever. And when that point was made in this House, the Minister, I think, began to see the strength of it, and the Health Committee had made the points about it, but still we voted it through in that form because we were guillotined. And the Minister said, and he made a very reasonable complaint, that he wasn't able to say some of the things he said here today in this House because of the time constraints in Dáil Éireann. But who imposed that guillotine, Minister? I asked through the chair. And the answer is, you did. You imposed, your whips imposed that particular deadline on Dáil Éireann. And it was you and your party, and I'm not going to get overly excited about it, but I am saying that those members who found themselves forced into voting against the entire bill because they couldn't move their amendments and have them individually voted on were the victims of a decision made by this government to shove this thing through regardless because of the time frame the government itself had created. Now, I know that Monday was to be the cut-off date and that we had to legislate before Monday. But there was no reason why this legislation couldn't have been introduced 2 months ago, with plenty of time to debate it, because that date was clearly there. Everybody knew that that date was coming. And the notion that you create this emergency by not legislating to extend until it's getting very urgent, and then turn around and say, and I myself couldn't contribute to a debate because of what the whips had put down on the order of business in Dáil Éireann. It's a bit much, Minister, and I'm not going to get in any sense ratty with you. I'm just saying, yeah, I'm not. No. That's not ratty, and I can tell you, I just want the irony of what you have come in here to complain about made very, very clear. We wanted to debate these issues in this House. We wanted more time to deal with it. We wanted to make the amendments you wanted to make, but we were told, no, push it through to one vote, and that's it. That's what happened in this House, and that's what happened eventually in Dáil Éireann. Now, you've said that you can understand those people who believe in no restraints at all, and the consistency of their position, that they just vote against any such regulations. And you think that they are somehow to be credited with some degree of rationality. Whereas you then accuse the people who opposed your bill, who couldn't amend it because of the orders of business and the guillotines that you put down, of being reckless for objecting to that procedure. And that raises the fundamental question as to how we have dealt with this COVID crisis. We have dealt with it in, I believe, a very inadequate way, and I won't put it stronger than that. I could use different adjectives to deal with it. We had, when there was no government, only an acting government, before the Minister became Minister, we had an all-party COVID committee chaired by Deputy Michael McNamara. And its function was, as a Dáil committee, was to look at what was being done. And it was a semi-permanent oversight mechanism. And the purpose of it, the intended purpose, and I've spoken to Deputy McNamara on many occasions and other people who were on that committee, was to seek accountability from NPHET. Bring them in, ask them precisely, justify your inter-county travel, or justify 5 kilometres rather than 20 kilometres, or whatever it might be. And that was disbanded at the behest of the government. And we were told that instead of that, we would have a different system, that all the sectoral committees would deal with the COVID crisis separately. And the result is that there was effectively little or no oversight of what the regulations were in fact achieving, or whether they were or were not in any particular respect excessive. Now, the Minister said 2 things. You know, you can always annul a regulation. But let's live in the real world. If we annul the regulations that are made, just remember this we act recklessly, Minister, because we scrap everything, even though there's a paragraph in it that we object to. You can't just annul one paragraph of a statutory instrument. Either the whole thing stands or it doesn't. So it's the same binary choice that the House of the Oireachtas are faced with. A regulation is made, it says, 10 miles or 10 kilometres instead of 5 kilometres. If you object to the 10 rather than the 5, the only thing you can do is to put down a motion in either House of the Oireachtas to annul that statutory instrument. And then you'd be accused of being reckless because you'd be told that you're going to sweep away all protections everywhere in the country on the same basis. So let's remember that. If you're going to accuse other people of being reckless, remember this, that one has to remember that if you annul a statutory instrument, the whole thing goes, every single last bit of it goes up in smoke, and the result is there's no regulation whatsoever. So that's the same kind of binary choice that was being put before people. Now, I voted when the former Minister for Health came into the Seanad seeking the original amendments to the 47 Act. I voted for them because I thought they were necessary, and that was in the run-up to March, April, whatever it was, of last year. And I hoped at that time that this would be a short-lived thing, as indeed we all did. But the problem is now that very, very far-reaching decisions are being made which affect the country at every level. And the process has not been satisfactory. There should have been a special standing committee of the Houses of the Oireachtas to bring in COVID, to bring in NEFIT, to bring in the people who are giving this advice and to ask them hard questions about the advice they were given. It's all very well for the minister to say, well, the department receives the advice from NEFIT and it brings it to the government, and ministers in the government also challenge the matter, and then you can always annul a regulation afterwards if you want. But the fundamental point is that the lawmaking process for the Irish people under our constitution is the Houses of the Oireachtas, and the Oireachtas collectively acting. And by bringing the matter via NEFIT to the department, via the department to the cabinet, via the cabinet out in the form of regulations, and then saying to the House of the Oireachtas, you can annul the whole thing if you like, that's your only choice. That is not proper consideration, and there should have been, and we could have had a different approach. And I'm just making this point to the Minister. We could have had a situation whereby regulations can come in and have a life of 3 weeks and then have to be debated and approved, line by line, scrutiny, go through it and justify the measures that were in it. That was possible, but it was inconvenient. And that's the problem that we've had. And so I'm not here to speak on behalf of TDs who voted against the entire bill, but I do share a sense of perhaps a bit of repressed anger that they should be accused of being reckless when they were corralled into making a binary choice, do it my way or no way. And then they're told, since you're doing it no way, then you are reckless. That's not reasonable. So I just want to make that point. And the other point that the Minister made about judicial review, that's fine, except it isn't a case that a judge can come to the view that he or she wouldn't have made the particular regulation in the form it was made or whatever. In order to succeed in judicial review, you have to show that the decision was irrational, in the sense that no reasonable person in the Minister's position could have made the decision the Minister did. So in other words, if it's 5 kilometres or 20 kilometres or 2 metres distance or 1.5 metres distance on a bus, or a quarter or a half of public transport capacity, you can't just go in and say, Judge, with the greatest respect, that's excessive. And have the judge say, well, I agree with you, I'm going to strike it down. Excessiveness is not the issue. It is a reasonableness in terms of whether any minister could reasonably, exercising the powers he or she had, make the regulation in the form it's in. And if you don't meet that test, you fail. So, I mean, a High Court judge could say, he or she, you know, this 20 kilometres thing is a bit daft. In my view, if I was going to do it, I'd have done 10. But who am I to say that the minister got it wrong, or it's got it madly wrong, or that no reasonable minister could have said 10 kilometres rather than 5 kilometres, or all counties are the same for the purpose of restrictions. Those issues are ones where judicial review does not avail somebody challenging the measure unless they prove that it was so lacking in proportionality or lacking in reasonable justification that no reasonable minister could have exercised the power in which the minister did, making that statutory instrument. So that's not much of a safeguard in terms of working out whether, for instance, the construction industry is or is not an area that should have been exempt, or whether social housing should have been allowed go ahead, but ordinary non-social housing should have been halted. Those are kinds of decisions that the High Court cannot really purport to make. Those are decisions which were made at Cabinet. And those are decisions which required justification, and they did not receive. There was no debate that I've heard of, and maybe it happened somewhere that I wasn't aware of in these houses. But I don't remember somebody saying, you know, that there's a rational distinction to be made between allowing social housing projects to continue and saying that private housing, non-social housing projects must halt. You know, there may be some science about that. Maybe Dr. Holden has some view out of a variant that sort of flits here and there between different housing estates. I don't know, but I am making this point. At least somebody should have been in a position to ask him or the minister that question and to get a rational answer before that regulation was made. So I don't want to hog the time, and I know there are others who want to speak, but I do want to say this, that you know, we are now in a position, a wholly artificial position, wholly unnecessary, that we're up against a deadline, and the minister is now saying, if you don't do it my way, you are reckless. I mean, that's the gist of what he's saying in this House. And I want to indicate I am going to vote against it, and I'm not going to be reckless. I'm going to vote against it as a protest. I know you have the numbers here, so it doesn't, I know the consequences. But I am going to vote against it in its entirety because there has not been sufficient public oversight and Oireachtas oversight of the measures that have been taken, and the mechanisms for oversight have been wholly overridden by decisions such as decisions to impose guillotines and the like, and all of that. I mean, I'll give you an example. In Limerick, the minister very interestingly tells us today, and it's a serious matter if there's an outbreak of 200 people in Limerick, and if it's not Delta variant or whatever the Indian variant is now called. So be it. I'd like to know some other facts about that. I'd like to get in Dr. Holden and ask him the very simple question, how many people who have been semi-vaccinated have succumbed in the last while? Is it mainly among people who have not been vaccinated at all? How many people who have been double vaccinated have become ill? And how many of them have been hospitalised? I'd love to know those answers. But there is no means of finding them out from in this House. There isn't. There isn't. Well, the minister hasn't told us. The minister hasn't told us. There's no reason. There has been. Look, you could go back. I'm not going to hog the time, but you could go back to the maps they showed of outbreaks of COVID, and there were ones which were 6 months old, still appearing as clusters on maps. There are all sorts of problems which have been there, and I'm just saying this. It isn't good enough to say, here is my bill, these are my regulations, give me the powers, do it my way, or face the accusation of being reckless. Or face the accusation of being reckless. I welcome the action of the government in at least facing up to the proposition that it wasn't going to make this an open-ended emergency in the way that it was. Sorry.
just think you said that.
Sorry. Senator 39, you have to ask permission. I didn't hear you. Senator McDowell.
If he wants to make an intervention in my speech, he's perfectly welcome to do so, but he'll only lengthen the matter.
The Senator has said he doesn't want to hog the time.
Ward,
we are now 5 minutes away from the end of this session. If he doesn't want to hog the time, maybe he should see that.
And who may I ask set an hour for today? Who set the guillotine in the Dáil? Who did any of that? All of the government senators sheepishly support these guillotine measures. And we could have had a vote on the order of business today and eroded more time. I'm just saying it's about time the guillotine stopped falling on important measures which affect everybody's daily routine. And most importantly, it's about time that these houses took back some real degree of scrutiny over laws which are having a huge effect on how our society is functioning.
Thank you.